Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Secretary of State of the United States, accompanied by Alan Cobb, President of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, and Meg Young, Foreign Service Officer at the U.S. Department of State.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited to welcome you all here today to the Road to the Global Entrepreneurship Summit Heartland event. It's a privilege to have the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and Dutch Minister of Trade and Development Cooperation, Sigrid Kaag, here as we highlight the incredible innovation and entrepreneurs of America's heartland and discuss resources and people that can help you all grow and go global. My name is Meg Young, and I'll be your MC today. I'm a Foreign Service Officer, and I have served over the past 10 years in Shanghai, China, Washington, D.C., and Lisbon, Portugal. During that time, some of the most rewarding work I have done is what American diplomats do around the world every day: build connections between innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors in the U.S. and abroad. Over the years, I have worked on hundreds of programs that have made these critical connections. We have created jobs in the U.S. as foreign businesses were able to make the right connections and bring their companies to the U.S. to scale. We created opportunities for American investors in emerging tech and innovative industries abroad. We have connected American businesses in new markets and partners around the world and promoted the United States as an investment destination, and so much more. I'm particularly excited to be here in Overland Park, Kansas for this event because, you see, I know that Kansas and the Heartland are home to some of the most remarkable innovators and entrepreneurs in the world because I'm a sixth-generation Kansan. I grew up right here in Johnson County and went to college at Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, and I worked my first real grown-up job with the Rotary Foundation in Evanston, Illinois. So I've seen this region become a powerhouse of creativity and innovation in everything from healthcare to agriculture to connectivity and beyond. And the rest of the world is seeing it too. And this event offers one more excellent opportunity to highlight the incredible talent, creativity, and capability that is here in the Heartland. And all of us who work for the American taxpayers will continue to do all that we can to make the connections that create the opportunities for American businesses at home and abroad. As part of our efforts, the State Department hosts the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, or GES. GES brings together entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders to promote entrepreneurship, innovation, and business-friendly practices around the world. Past summits have been held everywhere from Silicon Valley to India. This year, the 9th GES will be held on June 4th and 5th in The Hague and will be co-hosted by the United States and the Netherlands. Several years ago, the State Department started organizing domestic events like this one, and this year we have a great day-and-a-half program that we hope will educate, inspire, and excite you. The program is designed to help you forge new relationships and learn more about some of the great government resources we have available to you. So let's get started. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce all of you to the President of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, the state's leading business advocacy organization, Mr. Alan Cobb. Mr. Cobb is a native of Kansas and was a former state director for Senator Bob Dole. Alan was part of the public affairs team at Koch Industries and recently served on the presidential transition team prior to joining the Kansas Chamber. So with that, Mr. Cobb, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you, Meg. Quick housekeeping note: at the conclusion of Secretary Pompeo's remarks, Lily Liu from Wichita's Cake TV will host a fireside chat with the Secretary here on the stage. Well, I've had the pleasure of being friends with Mike Pompeo since he moved to Wichita in 1998 to start Thayer Aerospace. That venture exposed the entrepreneurial side of Mike Pompeo. He and friends from Harvard Law School combined several aircraft parts manufacturers into one larger firm, eventually selling it to yet a larger firm. They made complex component parts used throughout the aerospace industry. If you've flown on an airplane, you've flown on a plane with a Thayer Aerospace part. He then entered another of Kansas' economic pillars, oil and gas, as the president and CEO of Century International, a company that supplies equipment to the oil field. Both ventures took him across the globe, something that kind of comes in handy today. This, along with patrolling the Iron Curtain as the leader of a tank platoon, shaped his views on the complexity and importance of global business and global diplomacy. And just a quick note that he served in West Germany after being at the top of his class at West Point. He has strong, measured judgment that is rock solid, is a dedicated public servant, all qualities that I cherish in a friend and in turn cherish for our country. He's a model of how you get things done. While being on the opposite side of some important Kansas constituencies on some issues while a member of Congress, he not only worked hard to find common ground, but he actually led to important legislative victories. He's the author of a bill that makes FAA approvals of aircraft enhancements and updates much easier. He was the national leader to enact legislation supporting the continued production of GMO products, that's genetically modified organisms. These GMO products are used by Kansas farmers and are feeding the world and reducing worldwide hunger. Working closely with Mike in several areas, including his 2014 reelection, I cannot properly express how fortunate we are as Americans and Kansans to have Mike Pompeo in such an important role. Yes, certainly for the United States, but maybe more importantly for the world. He is a strong leader, resolute, firm, obviously smart, and he's fearless. He has high standards for himself and everybody that works for him. I feel safe, Mike, leading our country's efforts in the hotspots of the world, Syria and the Middle East, South China Sea, the former Eastern Bloc, North Korea, and unfortunately we have to add Venezuela to this list. Mike is a Kansan, a patriot, a dedicated husband to his wife Susan and his son Nick, and overall he's just a really good guy. Please join me in welcoming fellow Kansan, U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo.
Good afternoon, everyone. That voiceover intro was a little much. I thought I might be walking into a wrestling match or something. And maybe I am. Thank you, Alan, for that generous, kind introduction. It's great always to be introduced by someone who you admire and who's a good friend, too. Before I begin with the formal part of my remarks, I know we have a delegation here from the Netherlands in the audience with us. It's led by Trade Minister Sigrid Kaag. I want all of you to know how much we're thinking about you with the tragic incident where there were at least 3 killed this morning, where there was gunfire opened on the metro system, people simply going about their daily lives. America stands with you. We will continue to do all we can to help you in this terrible time of tragedy. So thank you for being here with us today. You know, Alan talked about my life before I was a Secretary of State. I want you to know that much of what I did before I came here impacts what I do here today. And we're proud to co-host, along with the Netherlands, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit alongside you in The Hague on June 4th and 5th. I hope a lot of you will come join us there as well. And I want to make sure you all feel very welcome here in Kansas. It's a great place. It's a little different than The Hague, but there's a lot to love here, too. You all know, those of you who know me, we had a bunch of friends show up today, too, and Susan and I are so happy about that. I spent my summers here in Kansas as a child, mostly down in Wellington and Winfield, Kansas, and then had a chance to come back here to start a business with 3 friends in the mid-'90s. Alan talked about their aerospace. We bought a small business at 7330 North Broadway at the very far north end of Wichita and spent a decade growing it to several hundred jobs. I was proud of that. And so I know that from that experience that I can see how the Heartland is an ideal place to do business, and I'm proud that we're able to host this event as the State Department did. I told the story earlier. I was Secretary of State for, a handful of weeks, and a note came and said, hey, would you be willing to come to the American part of the Global Entrepreneurship Summit? And I wrote a small note back saying, only if it's in Kansas. Here we are. Thanks. I hope, too, you all get a chance to meet each other. There's an amazing group of people in the room today. I know many of you, but some of you I don't. There are remarkable foreign entrepreneurs in attendance today who do business here in the Heartland, and I hope some of you will join us in The Hague. There's an enormous amount of opportunity here in this region. I was 2 weeks ago now in Iowa touring a research facility called Corteva. It's an engineering firm that's working on engineering disease-resistant crops. It's the sort of innovation that changes the world, and it's happening right here in the heartland. I spent a little bit of time working in small businesses. I want to talk today about the connectivity between what the State Department does and what you all do as entrepreneurs. I want to share some of the lessons I learned and how I integrate them into my work in the State Department and how I hope my team at the State Department does the same. Three central ideas, three principles. First, we use these same ideas to generate good outcomes for President Trump's foreign policy. Second, we have an important component at assisting countries around the world in investing here and helping American companies succeed overseas. Economic diplomacy is very much at the core of what the State Department does. And then two, I want to talk about the State Department, the leadership team there, and how I use the same things that I learned where you all are out taking risks to deliver on behalf of America using the team at the United States Department of State. First, President's foreign policy. You don't put entrepreneurship and foreign policy in the same buckets all the time, but I must say, one of the things I learned as a small businessman is if you do the things the way they were done before, you'll fail. You have to rethink the old ways of doing things, and President Trump has certainly done that. I ran a company that made plane parts. They came from hundreds of suppliers. Our pitch, our value proposition was that we would consolidate those suppliers so that we could deliver a value-added product to our customers. Just an example, Ford entry doors on a commercial airplane had over 500 suppliers, 500 parts from over 65 suppliers. And we realized that we could reduce cost, help the customer become more efficient, and increase their purchasing efficiency as well by reducing storage costs and inventory for them. We did that. We also helped them reduce their assembly time. That approach worked. It taught me that success involves thinking differently. I do that today along with President Trump. A good example is North Korea. We came into the administration with missiles being fired and nuclear tests being conducted. Every approach taken over the past 2 decades had failed. Previous administrations had tried many approaches. We decided we would do something different. We coordinated a global effort, a global economic sanctions campaign to raise the stakes for the regime, to impose costs on them, but to do so at the same time by extending a diplomatic hand in pursuit of peaceful progress with North Korea. We're not done. Hard work remains. The President and I were in Hanoi now a couple weeks back to build on what had happened in the Singapore summit, but we've brought about a situation that has never occurred with respect to the Korean Peninsula. We currently have both the toughest sanctions in history as well as the most promising diplomatic campaign in history, too. We hope this combination will lead to a safer, more secure region in Southeast Asia and around the world. Another lesson I learned as an entrepreneur was the importance of forging strong partnerships. The aerospace, we seldom engaged in a project alone. We had supplier partners, and our customers were partners. We had lenders and shareholders all working together. We had to work with dozens of firms to deliver the product to our customers. We always made sure that the company's leaders knew our objectives, what it is we were trying to accomplish. And then we turned around and gave them access to the information they needed, what we had, the job requirements, inventory needs, all the deadlines that we were going to face together. I see this every day in diplomacy. America cannot do what it needs to do around the world alone. We have to bring together multiple partners under a single mission and empower each of those partners to deliver those results. I've seen this too often. I've seen in previous administrations where either America took it upon itself to resolve the problems alone, or we withdrew because the problem was too difficult, too big, too costly. We're trying not to do that. The Trump administration is reestablishing American leadership all around the world. And I can prove it. I've got a number of examples. Just last month, I was in Warsaw at a U.S.-led event co-hosted by our Polish friends where we brought 60 nations together to work to secure peace in the Middle East. We had Arab and Israeli senior leaders sitting in the same room. They were discussing their shared challenges together. When's the last time that happened? And what was truly unique about it was that it didn't feel new, it didn't feel strained, it didn't feel challenged, it felt right because we had set the right conditions for them to begin to work together on a common set of objectives. We too are working on a broader objective. We call it MESA. It's our Middle East Strategic Alliance. It will, when it comes to fruition, be a broad spectrum of countries from the Gulf and from North Africa, all throughout the Middle East, aimed singularly at taking down threats from all across that region. It'll work on economic issues, it'll work on security issues, and we'll work on political issues. We'll work on meeting their energy needs as well. When we come together, when that group comes together, we will deliver good outcomes, most importantly, for the people of the United States with whom President Trump and I are charged keeping secure. Another great example is one that is much in the news today. It's the challenge that the Venezuelan people are facing. We were heartened to see the countries of South America be first in line to join our effort to restore democracy in Venezuela and to recognize interim President Juan Guaido. Through diplomacy, our team rallied partners to build a coalition that now amounts to over 50 nations, will ultimately achieve an outcome that the Venezuelan people are demanding and which they deserve. We also were able to put together an enormous coalition to defeat ISIS and its caliphate. The coalition is still together, and the caliphate is gone. 79 nations came from all parts of the world to join in taking down this threat from radical Islamic terrorism. I could go on, from Iran to North Korea, from the work that we've done to strengthen NATO, the coalition we're building out in the Indo-Pacific to counter the threat that China presents to the world. The Trump administration is working diligently to build the partnerships that you all do each and every day in your business life. We're empowering those partners to deliver on their own for their people and to have a set of shared objectives that deliver for the entire world. I want to talk about the second way that my time in small business works on behalf of what I'm trying to do at the State Department. It's the economic diplomacy that I spoke of earlier. You should know we have a dedicated team of diplomats that run programs and events. You had a chance to meet one of them this morning. That engages in helping countries build their free enterprise systems all around the world. Today's event and the Global Entrepreneurship Summit itself in the Netherlands in June are just two examples. Today with us are over 23 women entrepreneurs from around the world. They're part of a State Department program that brings businesswomen to America to build relationships and learn alongside U.S. businesses. March is Women's History Month. Susan's with me today. She reminds me every morning in March. It's a great opportunity to celebrate these women and many others all across America and the world who are starting their own businesses to build wealth for themselves and for their families. Here in the Midwest, we have a thriving community of women business leaders. In fact, Chicago has the highest concentration of female founders in the entire country. The State Department has a number of programs. I hope you will all learn about them and avail yourselves of them. We have programs that empower innovators to develop startups addressing social challenges all around the world in countries that aren't so rich as the Netherlands and the United States. Through that initiative, State Department has mentored over 8,400 startups in 136 emerging economies. These businesses have gone on to generate over $250 million in revenue and created 6,000 jobs, including at least 70 right here in the United States. And that leads me to my next point. Our economic diplomacy efforts are an important part and in complete alignment with what it is we're trying to do, delivering not only U.S. values, but delivering on the American interest where we find it as well. The goal of all of our work, all across the State Department, is to serve the American people. You are, in fact, our first client. That includes your economic interest. Many of you wouldn't know this. We have over 1,500 economic officers deployed around the world in embassies and in consulates. They can provide market insights. They can answer questions. They can connect you with local partners. They know the geography. Please avail yourself of this assistance. Too, we have another group of State Department officials. We call them political officers. They work alongside the economic team to fight back when we find out about corruption or political problems that our companies and businesses are running into around the world. We have foreign agricultural assistance officers as well. These agricultural officers promote our exports to lands all across the globe. And we also engage in workshops. Some of you had a chance to participate in them here today and tomorrow. Our mission of serving U.S. economic interests is deeply integrated into what we do at the State Department. And by the way, a footnote, we're always looking for real talent. The State Department prides itself on having a diverse workforce. There's many dimensions to that. I want to make sure everyone we hire is not from New York or Boston or Washington. We have talented people all across the Midwest, some of whom would simply not be aware of the enormous opportunities there are to serve America as diplomats. It has been an incredible privilege for this past year to serve as America's most senior diplomat. We need young people with language skills, with math skills. We hire engineers, we hire security officials, a broad range of skills brought to bear. And it's a great opportunity, a little bit to see the world, but mostly to serve our nation. Back to the main message. By the way, there are recruiters standing just off to my right here. The final thought about the connection, about the lessons that I learned in small business that I use now as the Secretary of State, is that leadership in every organization matters. The internal operations of the State Department oversee roughly 80,000 great people working on behalf of the United States. It's been an incredible privilege to lead that group. I always stress to them, first and foremost, is that we have an obligation. It's different than the one I had in the private sector. We have a responsibility to be good stewards of your money. When I ran Thayer Aerospace during budget season, it was always a set of tough questions. My investors and shareholders deserved that. The American taxpayer deserves very much the same. I would always remind people that money had to be accounted for in every single transaction we took. If we were going to take a risk, we needed to understand what that risk was. I bring that same standard of accountability to this job. I'll tell you a single story. It was in a budget meeting. It was in the early 2000s, just after 9/11. We had a big project that we were trying to undertake at a very difficult time all throughout the United States, and certainly a difficult time in our industry making airplane parts. I asked the team, I told them I thought we could come up with the resources. I believed we could find money for the project, but would this be the first of many? If I sign off on this now, you have to commit to me that you'll deliver, will measure, not inputs, but outputs and outcomes. How can you commit to me that you won't come back looking for more money 2 months or 6 months or 8 months from now? I guess they knew me well enough because they were prepared. They laid out a plan, a set of objectives, a set of measurements that we could reduce risk and account for each and every action that we were taking. I've done the same thing here at the State Department. I think it's next week. I will testify. You can all watch. I'll testify on the budget that the State Department has put forward, essentially the request that we will make to Congress to take money from American taxpayers to deliver on the very mission set which I'm speaking to you about today. You have my word. My team and I are committed to doing this in a way that will honor you and make you proud. I will tell you this too. Running a company taught me that the best ideas don't always come from the top. Certainly true today. I know that my team brings enormous experience to what it is we're trying to do. When I became the Secretary of State, I quickly realized that a lot of my time was spent rubber stamping decisions that came from elsewhere. I wasn't adding any value to this decision process. Just to give me the final word meant either they were looking for me to cover for them, or they were simply following a tradition that had taken place for years and years before. I have now changed all of the structure where at least a third of the decisions that used to come to me no longer do. That paper doesn't come to my desk. It makes our business more agile. More agile. It makes us faster. Our adversaries certainly are. We have greater efficiency. And most importantly, we've got an excited workforce. They know they're responsible. They know that we'll hold them accountable. They know they have a duty to keep me informed. But they also know they have the ball, and that if I've given them the right direction and they succeed, we will be rewarded. Our team will be rewarded. I want to close with just one final thought about the summit this June. It'll take place, as I said, on the 4th and the 5th. The following day, June 6th, 2019, will be the 75th anniversary of D-Day, a historic day where an assault force led by a great Kansan put tyranny on its heels and turned the tide in what was the deadliest conflict in human history. Throughout the rest of the war and in the rebuilding that followed, America led Europe out of the shadows and into a future democracy and a future of free enterprise. It was that system, the free enterprise system, which has proved to be the greatest economic model ever conceived. It is, as I travel the world and see all the others, it is the only system where a business started in a dorm room can disrupt $1 billion industry, and where risk takers can rise from the crowd if they'll work hard and have a good idea. People from all walks of life will use their talent and work hard and be successful. It's worthy of comparing what I see elsewhere, countries that don't have that model, comparing it to socialism, which puts government bureaucrats in control of the economy, and which failed spectacularly every single place it has been tried. You know, in the decades following World War II, a man named Peter Drucker emerged as one of the original business management gurus. Many of you will have read his books. He had firm beliefs about the role of government in the private sector and the success that entrepreneurs can have in a free society. Not only economic success, but the freedom and the liberty that comes with that. He believed that when managed properly, businesses could protect freedom. It could protect the individual and create space for each of us to live the lives that we want. He wrote, quote, "Performing responsible management is the alternative to tyranny and our only protection against it." As each of you goes out from here and you create the next generation of great businesses, each of you must help to ensure the success and freedom of the free enterprise system in your country. And more importantly, all of us in this room must take our belief in the power of entrepreneurship out amongst the others in the world. It is worth evangelizing about. I look forward to seeing as many of you as can make it over to The Hague in June for precisely that purpose. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to taking a few of your questions today. Thank you.
You can hear me. I will speak loud if I have to. Well, Mike, welcome back to the Heartland. Of course, people that might be watching might wonder what this area, what they might call flyover country. Why did you decide to have it right here in the Heartland, right here in Kansas, as one of the events for GES?
I know this place. I know you all. I know the people in this place. I wanted to make sure that the State Department came to know this place, and frankly, that the people in this place came to know the State Department a little bit too. So that was the mission set. There is an enormous amount of good that happens all around the world. I travel, I want to go, I get a chance to visit our embassies around the world. I'll always be with my team. There's almost always someone from the back who will shout, "I'm from Newton." and I love that, and I want it to be 7 people, not just one.
Well, Mike, I know that you and Susan are big Shocker fans. They made it into the NIT. But what I wanted to talk to you about is President Bardo passed away last week. And he's been called an innovator, an entrepreneur. What do those words mean to you in terms of how universities can also help with entrepreneurship and innovation?
So one of the things that has been the true engine, and I see this all the time, we're the organization that allows students to come here, right? We provide the visas at the State Department for students to come study here. So I'm very familiar with our policy about how we do that. What I see time and time again, certainly at places like Wichita State and the University of Kansas and K-State and all the great schools here, but all across the country, is the talent that we attract from all around the world. It's indicative of the greatness of our nation. It's indicative of the greatness of our universities. Our challenges are twofold. One, we want to make sure that that talent, those resources that America is providing, stay here, that we can continue to keep these young people who want to come be part of the American wealth creation machine have the opportunity to do so. And second, we want to make sure that these universities still have the opportunity to bring in kids all across the world. I see them when I meet with my foreign counterparts it is often the case that they will tell me that they studied somewhere here in the United States. They often learn not only math, English, and history, but they learn about the American value set as well.
Mike, we might say that we're both from Wichita, so you know about the history behind Wichita. There's a lot of companies that were founded in Wichita. We have that entrepreneurial spirit. Pizza Hut was founded there, Cessna. What is the state of entrepreneurship now, especially right here in Kansas as well as globally?
Boy, it's hard to, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that. I'll say this much, and this is way out of my lane in the administration. I do diplomacy, but this administration has done its best to understand that you can't keep a nation safe. We can't keep America safe without an enormous engine for economic growth here in the United States. It underpins everything. I don't have a single meeting with any of my foreign counterparts. There may be an exception, but not many, where we don't talk about energy and wealth and business and trade and all of the things that America has at the center of its success. So President Trump understands we've got to have America growing. If we have that wealth engine behind us, countries will partner with us. They'll want to be with us. They'll want to come here and study. They'll want to come start their businesses here. They'll fear us when we have something that an adversary is seeking, and they'll understand that there's something that is backing up that machine. The entrepreneurship, the freedom that comes here in the United States from our system, and the entrepreneurs that are inspired by that opportunity are a central part of what it is I'm trying to do to keep America safe.
You brought up President Trump. You are his Secretary of State. I know people in this room, especially those from Kansas, want to know what's it like to work as the Secretary of State, and just how do you feel about being in that role, and how long do you plan to be there?
So I'm going to be there until he tweets me out of office. Which I'm not counting on, at least today. It has been an enormous privilege to be part of the Trump administration. He is truly a leader who provides guidance to me. He says, Mike, this is the direction we want to go. It is oftentimes different than what we've done before. I think that's a great thing. It gives us a real opportunity to partner in different ways and build coalitions in different ways. He gives me that guidance, and then he sets me free and holds me accountable. He demands that the State Department deliver on the things we've said. I lay out for him a couple times a month, hey, here's the set of objectives, immediate, near term, medium term, and here's what we're trying to do that is longer term. We measure against those real objectives, and he holds us accountable. I talk to him almost every day, making sure that I'm doing what it is he wants to do. As President of the United States, I got 306 electoral votes, and I am determined to execute America's foreign policy as he lays it out. It's been the job of a lifetime, an incredible privilege. It is certainly hard work, but I have the support of a lot of folks here in Kansas who remind me that serving in this administration is a good thing, and I'm loving what I'm doing.
You're talking about hard work, and we just heard your resume. Very, very impressive resume, by the way. First in your class at West Point, served in the Army, editor of the Harvard Law Review, an entrepreneur, congressman, CIA director, and Secretary of State now. I want to know, your experiences with business, how that actually translates to your public service life.
Susan will vouch for this. It's always very kind. People drop us notes and say, thank you for your service, thanks for what you're doing. I always thought when I was running Thayer Aerospace, I was doing America a real service too. And I think you all are too. When I hired someone, that person got to go home and tell their family that not have a job. I can pay rent. I can take you on vacation. That's important. That's big stuff. That is life-changing in a way that I don't often get to touch today as the Secretary of State. I'm a little more disconnected from that. That idea that what we're shooting for is allowing individuals to live their lives the way they want to live them, to work where they want to develop themselves, to decide if they want to take a risk and go start a business. Those are at the very center of the American vision that the founders had, and I'm reminded that I serve in the footsteps of them. Right, Madison, Jefferson, Pompeo. I got it, right? Everybody gets it. Everyone gets the joke there. I must say, I don't deserve to be in the same sentence with them, but it is inspiring to see those statues and those pictures. It reminds me and my team every day of what it is that America can accomplish. And I think about that from my time in business as well. I think about, I went to work every day trying to make sure that we did right by the team. We tried to do as much as we could to make just as much money as we could too. That was the mission set. And to take care of the team members at the companies I ran. I do the same thing at the State Department every day.
You've had a lot of change in the last decade, and entrepreneurs deal with change a lot. What is your advice for entrepreneurs here in the room regarding change and embracing that change in order to innovate?
Those of you who have done this, the true entrepreneurs understand that they're operating without a net, that it's on them, and that the success of the business in the first instance is going to ride on the work they do. You build out a team, you do all the right things, but in the end, without a high tolerance for risk and the capacity to manage it, to identify it, to see the risk. My dad used to joke about the most important thing in life being you got to know when your rear end's on fire. That has served me well, and I think it serves a lot of entrepreneurs well too, so that you can see the path forward and you can have that vision. And if you have fear of failure, the likelihood you're truly going to succeed as an entrepreneur is much lower. You got to drill a lot of dry holes. You got to try a lot of things. We certainly do that every day in the State Department too. I encourage my team to be creative and take chances. And if we do those things well, entrepreneurs will succeed, America will grow, and we'll continue to be the greatest nation in the history of civilization.
You talked about challenges and also about failure. What is that message that you have for young people especially, or even entrepreneurs, regarding failing and the importance of failing and learning from those mistakes?
Yeah, well, first, don't try for it. I'm not remotely suggesting that as an objective. Only this, that it will be the outcome if you're pushing the envelope, if you're working at it hard. The second thing is make sure that your failure isn't cataclysmic. You should intentionally make the bet the business decision, and you shouldn't do it often. But you can find lots of other places to take appropriate risks that give you more time and more space. We have the same kind of decisions oftentimes in foreign policy as well. We have determined adversaries who are working diligently against us and who want to undermine everything we have sitting in this room today, who are intent on undermining Western democracy. They're taking risks too. So I always remind those that there's an inverse side to the risk that we take as well. There's a counterparty to almost every one of these decisions, and it is worthy to make sure you understand the full range of risks you're taking, what your adversaries are likely to do in response. And then I have young people ask me all the time, what do I need to do? And I must say, I only have 2 words: work hard. It is the rare creature who succeeds without working really, really hard. I've seen very few instances of that. I've seen lots of folks work hard and not get there too, but absent a dedication and commitment to your mission, whatever that is, the entrepreneurial mission or otherwise, the likelihood of really getting where it is you want to be is pretty low.
So let's talk about failure for a little bit more. What is the biggest failure that you had as a business owner, and how have you learned from that and carried it over to your role as Secretary of State?
Well, we had lots of them. I mean, we'd have them every day. We'd try new products, new business development. We'd try a new technique in the engineering section. There were lots of things. In the aftermath of 9/11, I spoke about it a bit. I had to let go a whole lot of people. There was no one buying airplane parts. Our customers weren't, and we weren't buying them from our suppliers either. I don't know if it was a failure, but it presented an enormous challenge to how we were going to make this thing go, how we were going to build it back in the aftermath. You remember the uncertainty post 9/11, at least I see some of you are too young, but trust me, it was there. It was an enormous challenge for myself and my partners to figure out how we were going to build that business back, how we were going to put a platform underneath where we were and then begin to build off of it. I see that at the State Department every day. I got off the phone early this morning with one of my senior officials who's in Baghdad today, working on a project. It is almost certainly the case that this won't succeed. It's going to take more effort, more grinding, more work, more preparation, but he understands where we're trying to go. He's going to take a pass at it. And he understands that when he comes away from this one, he needs to be better positioned so that the next time we take a run at this, I can get the outcome that we're looking for.
One of the individuals here that works in your department, I had a chance to speak with, Undersecretary Manisha. She was talking about how you brought the swagger back to the State Department. I want to know, how are you empowering women and your staff to take risks, to also learn from even small mistakes, but really just take more chances?
Yeah. I've talked about that a little bit. We have 80,000 people in the State Department, some odd. If we don't have every one of them in a place where they can deliver value every day, we are failing. When I came into the State Department almost a year ago now, I felt like we were on our back foot diplomatically. I felt like the team didn't have a rallying cry to go out and do what it was. I knew that we had the talent. I knew we had people who wanted to go out and bust it every day on behalf of America. And so I talked about swagger. I talked about making sure that every person, male, female, from wherever they come from, understood their mission set, and to go deliver. I made a commitment that we would treat every single State Department official, whatever their religion, whatever race they were, whatever gender they were, we would treat every one of them with the dignity that they deserved by mere fact that they were a human being, and that we would hold them accountable, and we would expect things from them in that same way. And I told them too, and I mocked a little bit for this. Indeed, there's a website out there. I think you should have joy in everything that you do. I am a happy warrior. I have bad days. They're tough people out there. But I find joy in delivering on behalf of the United States of America, and I want my team to find that joy every day as well. There's a joy meter. It's kind of a joke inside the State Department. Some days the people see me and say the joy meter is low today. But you have to do that. To be successful, you have to enjoy and love what you're doing. And when I talked about swagger, it was the confidence that I expect our officials to have when they go around the world, understanding that they represent the United States of America, and the responsibility that comes with that as well.
So you're talking about talent, and that is really at the heart of entrepreneurs as well, hiring the right people, putting them in the right roles. How do you retain that talent, though? As entrepreneurs, that might be a challenge.
So I was joking with someone a little bit earlier today. When we succeed, I can't give someone a bonus. Right? This is a tool that entrepreneurs have. You can, if they're really important, you can give them a little bit of equity in the business. I'm not sure anybody would want a little ownership of America's balance sheet today. There's an awful lot of work to do. But there are lots of ways you can create cultures of excellence. And we're trying to do that at the State Department. I drug a couple of my former business partners into the team, and we are working. We'll roll it out over the course of the next year. We're going to relook how we do training and education for officers during a career as a foreign service officer or a civil servant. We're going to relook how we do assignments and recruiting and promotion inside the organization. You all will have seen the ads you've seen, right? The Department of Defense, right? The few, the proud, the Marines. State Department has great people out saving lives all across the world as well. And I want the world to know that, and I want Americans to know that. I want young people all across America to understand that I'd welcome it. I was a soldier once. I'd welcome it if they joined the Department of Defense. But there's amazing work going on at the State Department as well, and they ought to take a look at that if it's something that they think would appeal to them.
You know, we're back here at the Entrepreneurship Summit, and I'm an alum of Youth Entrepreneurs, founded right there in Wichita, Kansas. And you know, many of those kids either go on to start their own businesses or they go on to work in different fields like myself. What is your advice to people, young people especially, about harnessing that entrepreneurial spirit, whether it's to be an entrepreneur or be entrepreneurial in your work?
You know, I've sort of given all the advice I have. Look, work hard, find joy in what you do. Be determined. Don't let the man get you down. On the worst of days, those of us who live here have the enormous benefit of being American citizens, an incredible privilege. As I travel the world, I see how fortunate we are. There are many great countries, but this is a unique place with a unique opportunity. And so I tell young people, don't squander it, enjoy it. It's difficult when you're 18 or 19 or 23 to see the glory. But I remind them of all that's gone before them, all the greatness that America has. And if they're willing to go out and work hard and keep the faith and tell the truth, it's often the day that good things will happen here for you and for your family and for the entrepreneurial venture that you're taking on.
You know, we talked about your time at Thayer with your buddies, starting that business. Well, now many millennials might believe that we often need work-life balance, looking for a job. But what is the reality of being an entrepreneur? You were a small business owner. Tell me about the sacrifices. I think that that's something that often we just see the glory, but there was a lot of grinding that happened beforehand.
Yeah. You know, I'm looking at the audience. I have lots of friends here who've been down that path, who today you stare at and you'd see them as very successful business people. And if you asked them a few questions, you'd realize it took a lot of hard work to get there. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but when it comes to work-life balance, if you're going to be successful, there's going to be a lot of work and a real challenge to get it balanced. People make different choices in life, and most importantly, I think people make different choices at different times in their life. But when you think you've got that opportunity, and you really want to drive it home, it's time for you to really be focused on what it is. If you're not, if there are too many focus, or you're too distracted, it's hard. I'm blessed. I get to focus every day at the State Department. I have a wife, Susan, who is enormously supportive of me. When this is over, I'm in debt like you don't know. But at different times in life, you can focus on different things. And if you found the thing you love and the thing you're going to drive to your ultimate success, and I don't just mean monetarily, I don't just mean wealth, the thing that you love and really want to build, you're going to have to make sure and prioritize sharply and probably not balance things as well as some of the textbooks might talk about.
You know, we talked about some of the partnerships that are required to bridge many of the entrepreneurs with the capital that might be needed. What are some things that we should be looking at in terms of value systems, values that we should be looking at in finding those partners and even people that we want to just associate with?
Look, at the top of the stack is if you can't trust that the person across the table from you is telling the truth, it makes it darn near impossible to be successful. I see this every day because I'm often in meetings where the person across the table from me is not telling the truth. But that game doesn't last very long. And so if you're going to take risk alongside someone or some entity, they've got to share your values. I see this when I watch efforts to create partnerships across cultures. That's a challenge. There are nations that have very, very different cultures than we have in the United States, some very successful countries. So you have to both bridge that cultural issue. You have to make sure that you're truly speaking to each other. And it's not just languages. You can actually work through the language issue. But cultural issues, the priorities that people set, the value system they bring to the problem, it is the case, not for a short-term deal. If you're just going to make a transaction, it's less of a priority. But if you're making a real commitment, taking risk on your own, you have to be able to trust that partner that when you're not watching, and you'll never be watching enough, you're confident that your shared objectives will override anything else it is that they're thinking about.
Mike, final question. You were inducted to the Wichita Business Journal 40 Under 40 Hall of Fame in 2014. That was 5 years ago. The question to you was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you said, I don't know if it'll be in public or private sector, but one thing you do know is you'll be grinding away. What do you see yourself doing in 5 years?
Yeah. Well, let's see. As I get older, I get smarter about not answering that question. It is hard to know what I'll be doing. We'll keep working hard. I'm only 55, so I'm not that old yet. Although there's days that I feel just a bit older than that as I travel. I hope I'm still finding a place to have an impact and a place to serve as well. I don't know. I'd love to get back to Kansas and start a small business again. It's home for Susan and me, but goodness knows what the Lord will bring, and we'll just keep working and stay tuned. We'll all find out.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lily. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as the Secretary departs. The program will continue momentarily.
Hi, my name is Manisha Singh, and I'm the Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs at the State Department. Oh. Well, maybe if I speak louder. There we go. There it is. Hi, my name is Manisha Singh. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs at the Department of State. I want to thank everyone in Kansas for a warm welcome to our State Department colleagues here. And I have the pleasure of introducing a local Kansas entrepreneur, Ann Konechny, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Foley Equipment Company, and she's going to introduce our next honored guest speaker. Ann?
Was her lav not working? Thank you, Undersecretary Singh. I want to once again welcome my fellow entrepreneurs and innovators here to the Road to Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Kansas. I'm excited to join Secretary Pompeo and his entire team from the State Department as in his effort to connect U.S. enterprise with overseas opportunities. Some of the best opportunities for American companies lie overseas in foreign markets, and our friends at the State Department are trying to help us explore those opportunities and to succeed. As CEO of Foley Equipment Company, we understand the importance of entrepreneurship and innovation. We strive relentlessly every day to innovate and to evolve to serve our customers' needs better and to grow. We also understand how vital international markets are. We represent Caterpillar, a truly global company, and we sell and buy equipment worldwide. We could not be more proud of the work and support the work that the State Department is doing. This year's Global Entrepreneurship Summit will be held in The Hague in the Netherlands in June. The Netherlands is a central part of the European Union's trade and commerce, and we are truly honored to have the Dutch Minister of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, Sigrid Kaag, here with us today in Kansas City. Minister Kaag has held this position since October of 2017. Prior to that, she served in many roles in the Dutch government and in the United Nations. She has been a tireless advocate for solving global conflicts, including working on the resolutions to the 2006 Israel-Lebanon conflict, and she led the mission to eliminate chemical weapons from Syria in 2013 and 2014. She has won numerous awards for her work in the Middle East. Minister Kaag is someone who understands that the work that entrepreneurs are doing today will build and define a better future for all of us, and that economic bridges are sometimes the strongest links between nations. She has supported initiatives to make the Netherlands one of the top 2 countries in the Global Innovation Index in 2018. GES 2019 is another way she's advancing innovation and entrepreneurship that will further strengthen the historic bonds between the United States and the Netherlands. We are extremely pleased to hear from her today. We look forward to working with our State Department team to make the 2019 GES Summit a huge success. Please join me in warmly welcoming Minister Sigrid Kaag.
Well, thank you very much. And of course, thanks particularly to Secretary of State Pompeo for having us here in his heartland. That's very clear, his home state of Kansas. But of course, I'd like to also very much echo the words of the Secretary just to say a few words about the awful event that struck my country, actually my home province of Utrecht today, The Netherlands was shocked by an attack in the city of Utrecht, and of course our thoughts, my thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their loved ones. And of course from here as well, I'd like to extend warm wishes for the speedy recovery of those who have been injured. Fortunately, our police services have caught the assailant and the authorities are currently investigating. Now, of course, in bridging, listening to the Secretary and his enthusiasm to speak to the quality and the tremendous, the excellence of the staff of the State Department, I realized we were also part of a recruitment mission. So let me say from my experience with all the US State Department staffers all over the world, I can only echo from experience what he said, and I certainly hope that many people from Kansas and other states will join. We see ourselves, of course, as being on an equal par, so I'd have to compliment my staff as well that are here today and in other countries. And it speaks to you. And of course, it speaks very much to the message we have today, which is in our preparation for the Global Entrepreneurial Summit that will be hosted in The Hague, the city of peace and justice, in June, on the 4th and 5th of June this year. And we saw this, we considered this a concrete deliverable that Prime Minister Mark Rutte and I were able to take away from our very important discussions with President Trump in July last year. But if we go back in history, ever since Henry Hudson sailed to America from Old Amsterdam, if I may call it that way, in 1609, we've been valued partners in trade as well as innovation. And more than 400 years later, Dutch trade and investments in the United States alone amounts to 825,000 jobs in this country. And our aims are also ambitious, similar to yours. We want to increase our share in jobs created in the United States to 1 million. We're ambitious, but also we love doing business with you. This will not change. This will only deepen in a more profound manner, certainly also after the Global Entrepreneurial Summit. And it's this common journey that we share with the United States that we also wish to celebrate here today and at the GES. Our common journey, of course, is more than just business, as important as business is to the United States and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Because business, international business, can only thrive within a broader climate of international predictability and sustainability. It's the ideal we've worked so hard together to establish in past decades, following 2 devastating world wars and under the invaluable guidance of the United States, where we established a rules-based order, a rules-based world, where international cooperation, collaboration remains highly valued and preferred as a means of solving problems or conflict and serving our shared interest. And it is an ideal we continue to work towards, not in a naive manner, but in a smart manner, with our trusted allies, and within a multilateral international system and based on treaty-based order. Systems that are in need of reform, as we agree with our American friends, and renewal, but they remain vital and important more than ever. After all, many of our global problems transcend national borders, and we look forward to continue to work with our American friends on reform, renewal, to build the new system, a system where business, international business, will thrive, where issues of sustainability are addressed, and we create new jobs for future generations, and building coalitions as we proceed, and improving our institutions where needed, and following the global roadmap that we developed together, the Sustainable Development Goals, we strive for that common goal, a world where freedom will thrive, prosperity can arise, stability and democracy will flourish, and where women and men truly have equal chances, and where economies keep a firm eye on sustainability of planet and our ways of living, where it's great doing business together precisely because we've been able to maintain predictability, transparency in our international conduct of business. And now, indeed, we've started from the heartland to Holland. I would like to alliterate, but of course we're called the Netherlands. But the heartland is a nice part in this story. And if the journey and the road towards the summit in June tells us one thing, It reminds us how much we share in values, in determination, in ambition, and how we can build and inspire others, other countries, entrepreneurs, young people, startups, scale-ups, women and men, and of course, all of you in this very room. The great news is, of course, we've also defined the challenges for which we seek the solutions, on which we've built the agenda of the GES. And no single sector can tackle them alone. We've looked precisely with great alacrity at areas of food and agriculture, of course Kansas, water, energy, but also connectivity and health. We all need to work together, academia, entrepreneurs, and government. Of course, the complexity before us is significant. We face questions in the Netherlands, and I'm sure it's similar in the United States. How can we make healthcare affordable for the future, accessible and high quality? Can we approach digitalization in a smart way in order to develop digital hospitals? What technologies are available to be given to older people and to give them the confidence to live at home for a much longer period of time? How can we produce affordable and nutritious food to feed the world? How can we ensure sufficient drinking water for all inhabitants of this planet? And how can we reduce microplastics and pollutants in water? These may appear as very specific questions, but they're real-time business problems, they are consumer problems, and they're even bigger entrepreneurial challenges with profit at the end of it. So we aim to connect. Not only as we connect continuously as governments, but we want entrepreneurs, researchers, investors, cooperation, and government staff, and to discuss, to meet, and come up with bigger and better ideas. So it's solutions to market with buyers to boot. So maybe you call us ambitious. I think, as Mike already has shown us in his life story, without ambition you don't go very far, but ambition, determination, hard work is really part of the ultimate process to arrive at solutions. Global challenges with smart business models for even smarter solutions. We know it can be done, and the government of the Kingdom of the Netherlands really wants to play its part. We have been working to improve our digital infrastructure and to reduce red tape for companies to start and grow businesses. We're organizing trade businesses and trade missions, and we invest in research and in the education of our workforce. And for all of you American entrepreneurs in this room, I certainly hope you know where to find our economic attachés, our business liaisons, our consulate generals, all the points to connect and provide answers to your questions on how to invest in the Netherlands, find the right Dutch counterpart, because they're waiting for you to knock on their door, to send them an email, and so I'm sure, knowing the Americans, you're not shy. And if you have a problem, call me, because we want to succeed together. This is a message in an era and a time of great insecurity, instability in many parts of this world. But if we can lead the way, the government of the United States of America, the government of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, I think we can demonstrate, we can inspire, and proof of example is always the best way to bring others along. So the marketplace for solutions for global challenges starts right in the city of The Hague, peace and justice, but also the country of innovation, together with you. I hope the weather will be kind. Our skies are not necessarily as bright as those in Kansas, but we'll do our very, very best to succeed together in June 2019. It's been a real privilege and honor to address you, and we are even more honored that we're asked to host, together with the United States, the GES 2019. Thank you very much. Manisha.
Well, this has been pretty exciting. Bringing together the recruitment, the Holland and the Heartland angles, I just want to tell you all, Kristen Stewart is our diplomat in residence, and she has a table outside, so even if it's not for you, if it's for your kids, your neighbor, I tell my story, I didn't know that diplomat was a job until my dad said, well, why don't you just try? You love the international world, you love the work. And I was like, really. So sometimes it's just boosting somebody along. So grab some papers from Kristen. Next up, we have Ross Duvall. Ross Duvall is a Walton Fellow with the Walton Family Foundation, focusing on research on policies related to economic vitality of the American heartland. He's also president and CEO of Heartland Forward. Mr. Duvall is a former chief research officer at the Milken Institute, where he led groundbreaking research on innovation and its economic impact, as well as the economic and human consequences of chronic disease. He previously served as Senior Vice President of IHS Global Insight, Inc., Director of Economic Planning for CSX, economist at Chase Econometrics, and economic analyst at Union Pacific. He was ranked among, I love this, among the superstars of think tank scholars by International Economy magazine. So, Mr. Duvall, thank you for being with us today, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm glad to be back in the Heartland. My first job out of graduate school was with the Union Pacific Railroad in Omaha, Nebraska, so I do have some Heartland credentials other than being born in Ohio. What I want to discuss today is really the multifaceted ways that innovation and entrepreneurship are determining the long-run growth potential not only of the United States economy, but also for the Heartland. In fact, we are so passionate about this topic, we just announced the formation of a new think and do tank called Heartland Forward that will be working on trying to promote economic performance in the center of the country through entrepreneurship, through building human capital, and improving health. And I have to warn you, I am an economist, which means you're going to find a series of graphs, charts, and maps, because my undergraduate degree is in geography. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to cover. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about just how important innovation is in determining long-term economic growth, both for the nation and for the Heartland. And then I'm going to use the State Technology and Science Index, which I originally developed at the Milken Institute, which looks at the comprehensive inventory of the innovation assets and entrepreneurial capacities of states around the country. And I'm going to focus a little bit about Utah, because you can learn a lot from Utah and entrepreneurship and using research universities to promote economic growth. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the integral role of higher education in building human capital, also using research universities to commercialize intellectual property, to convert it into a real economic impact in the economy. So there's the first chart. This shows you research and development spending by source here in the United States. And this is really the kind of innovation capacity of places. It's the raw materials of knowledge-based economic growth. And R&D capabilities are really critical because they fuel intellectual property that can be converted to a private sector enterprise, either through an existing firm or through a startup. So the federal government funds a lot of R&D, and most of that R&D is focused on basic science and on medical research. But it forms the basis of applied research, which can be commercialized later at for-profit enterprises. And as you can see from this chart, corporations are increasingly driving research and development in the United States. The federal government is still the largest funder. But really, to be at the vanguard, businesses need to be involved. Industry invests approximately 60 to 65% of total R&D, that's the applied part of it, and large corporations in the United States are among the leading innovators in the world. You know the companies, the Alphabets, the Googles, the Apples, I could go down a long list. But the U.S. also benefits, and I think this is what is really quite unique about the United States, is from the R&D intensive small firms that transform discoveries into products and services in the marketplace. We cannot be complacent in this day and age of innovation and entrepreneurship, because this year it is likely that China will invest more in research and development on a purchasing power parity basis than the United States will. They're placing big bets on 5G, mobile technology, robotics, AI, and biotechnology. Entrepreneurship and early stage financing that supports the process of company formation and growth are crucial to a nation's and regional economy's ability to grow over the long term. This is how jobs are created for citizens. It's important to recognize that entrepreneurial activity is molded by a consistent set of factors. First, the entrepreneurial framework includes training and support from both the public and private sectors in the availability of early-stage capital. It's the interaction of the recognition of the opportunities and the capacity to pursue them and exploit them that determines new firm efforts, starting them, scaling them up, and job formation in the longer term. This graph shows you the percent of the U.S. employment at young firms. So young firms are firms of 5 years of age or less, and it gives you a sense of just how important new businesses are, and especially to scaling them. You'll see that this has been falling over the past few decades. The good news is we may have hit a low point, and it may be coming back up. But I think we really need to understand a new conceptual framework for state and regional economic growth that must explicitly recognize the role of entrepreneurship, and especially here in the Heartland. Human capital is the most important intellectual property of a nation or a region's economy. This graph demonstrates the rapid increase in the percent of the adult population with a bachelor's degree or above in the United States. It has risen from 11% in 1970 to 34% in 2007. And this is truly the success story of the U.S. economy. And it's not just people that receive high returns to investment in human capital. It's also the firms that hire these people. You can look at firms that invest in human capital at a higher rate. They have higher sales growth, higher market share, higher profitability, higher productivity, and market capitalization. The rate of return to investing in incremental post-secondary education is exceptionally high for regional economies. Real GDP per capita and real wages per capita rise by 17 percentage points by adding 1 year of schooling to the average educational attainment. Think about that. The STEM workforce is really what converts intellectual property into a successful commercial enterprise. Despite representing less than 5% of all private sector jobs, these technology and science workers are critical components of an economy's ability to innovate and create high-value jobs. STEM workers' share of the U.S. workforce has risen from less than 2% in 1960 to 6.3 million workers today. These are the advanced industries, and there are 50 of them by our definition. They include those firms that are very R&D intensive and also hire a disproportionate number of STEM workers. They account for 8.7% of total U.S. employment, but 17.2% of GDP. They represent 60% of U.S. exports by value. They hire 80% of U.S. engineers, and they account for 81% of U.S. patents and an astonishing 89% of private sector R&D. So I did promise you a map. There are only going to be 2. So if you put all this together, when I was at the Milken Institute, I developed an index called the State Technology and Science Index. There are 107 individual indicators. They range from 5 different buckets, from R&D to entrepreneurship and innovation, human capital, the STEM workforce, as well as dynamicism and technology, or what Secretary Pompeo would call outcomes, measuring outcomes of things. Massachusetts has been number 1 on this index ever since we first published it in 2002. Colorado is now 2nd. Maryland is 3rd. And California comes in 4th, although if you break out coastal California, it would be number 1. But Utah has moved up to 5th in the most recent index, and just less than 2 decades ago, Utah was 10th. And because many of the variables in this index are stock measures, in other words, they don't change very rapidly as opposed to flows, that's a remarkable improvement. Utah embarked upon a path to encourage innovation, entrepreneurship, and investing in human capital. I had the opportunity to work with former Governor Leavitt back in the early 2000s in helping craft some of those policies, and it has really made a huge difference. You can see among the Heartland states, Minnesota is in the dark blue. That means you're in the top 10. Minnesota was 8th. Very innovative state, biotech, a whole range of activities there. Also, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Texas are among the leaders in the country. Now, this is a busy chart. Let me explain it. I am an economist, so I do have to use statistics. What does this really mean in a statistical sense, or what does it mean for people? I've shown you these maps. I say it's important. You can explain roughly 75% of the variation in real annual pay across the 50 states simply by how well states scored on this technology and science index. This is a high rate of explanatory power, and it would have made one of my early career mentors, Dr. Larry Klein, a Nobel Prize winner at Wharton, very pleased. Okay, last map. Research universities. I've done a lot of work in trying to demonstrate the role that research universities that are heavily engaged in commercialization play in propelling their economies. And I think this has grown ever important, and it's really bi-directional information exchange. In other words, it's not just from the universities coming out to the businesses. It is joint collaborative interaction and research where business has the opportunity to engage very early. And you'll see that there is a relationship between those states that scored high on that State Technology and Science Index and which states have universities that are focused on commercialization. So if you look here at the Midwest and the Heartland, you'll see University of Minnesota was ranked 14th, scored very high on the State Tech and Science Index. University of Michigan, the University of Illinois scores very high on that index. And actually, the highest Heartland state in terms of universities is Purdue, the highest scoring public university without a medical school is the University of Purdue. And so also look at Utah. They made major investments in research universities, and despite living in California for 20 years, where you have Stanford, UC San Diego, and Caltech, Utah, the University of Utah, is number 1 in terms of outcomes in converting research to jobs. And you also see that Brigham Young University is in the top 10 at number 4. This is important because jobs at young firms are a strong indicator of which economies are going to be successful. We've done research looking at which metros, which states have done well in terms of having a high share of jobs at young firms, and looking at longer term, 10 to 20 years out, how successful they've been in growing their economies. And there's a very strong relationship. The Heartland needs to focus more on entrepreneurship and scaling companies up to create jobs at a higher rate and to catch the coasts. Nebraska actually scores very high on this component. So let me just summarize on research universities. I truly believe they are one of America's strongest assets and one of the Heartland's greatest potential economic upsides. Both public and private universities succeed. They do it through creating both middle and high-skilled jobs, through innovation, commercialization, and tech transfer. And universities are clearly a clear source of competitive advantage. But it's really the entrepreneurial capabilities that are resident in places that aid universities in having an economic impact. The history of U.S. innovation is replete with examples of entrepreneurs adding new technologies originally envisioned at large firms, but couldn't see how to deploy them because they might disrupt a current business line. This startup and spin-off activity creates a virtuous self-reinforcing progression through cluster innovation and creating ecosystems that nurture successful entrepreneurship. And it's really the serial entrepreneur, both men and women. In many cases, women are the best entrepreneurs because they had to run through more walls to be successful. So as I have studied economies around the United States and world, where you have successful women entrepreneurs, you have successful economies. They recirculate what they learn, they mentor, they reinvest in companies, and they are critical to long-term success. I appreciate the patience you've afforded me to give you a brief overview of why this is important, and I would look forward to the opportunity to participate in the upcoming event in the Netherlands. Thank you very much.
Should have had Mr. Duvall introduce our next speaker, speaking of being a woman entrepreneur who recirculates what she knows into her entrepreneurial community. Maria Myers is Executive Director and founder of SourceLink. She has more than 20 years of experience in creating successful companies. She's lived through the struggles of launching a startup, turning it into a small business, and sustaining its growth. Through Casey's SourceLink, Ms. Myers has created a network that connects entrepreneurs with hundreds of business-building organizations throughout the Kansas City region. In addition to her SourceLink accomplishments, Ms. Myers is the Executive Director of the University of Missouri-Kansas City's Innovation Center, connecting university researchers, as we were talking, with the community to ignite collaborative partnerships leading to innovations and leading to innovations. It's been instrumental in the creation of UMKC's Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So with great pleasure, Ms. Myers, thank you for being with us today, and welcome to the stage.
So I am with the UMKC Innovation Center, and we derive our great joy and hard work from helping build a better environment for our entrepreneurs to work with. And I have a crowd of people up here with me that are along for that journey, and we'll get to meet them and talk to them in just a few minutes. So one of the things that we decided to do in Kansas City in about 2011 was to make Kansas City America's most entrepreneurial city. And you saw those geographies, so we're going to be on that map, right, pretty soon. So one of the things that we know through the work we've done in SourceLink is that in order to do that, there are 4 things you really need to do. You need to identify your assets. What have you got that'll help build an entrepreneurial economy? You need to connect them together, and we've heard a lot about that today as well. And then you need to, in those connections, understand where the gaps are and then empower the entire community to make a better environment for our entrepreneurs. And then, of course, you got to measure everything that you do so that you can know whether you're making any difference or not. And so those are the things that we work on through SourceLink. So one of the things that we know is there are a tremendous number of assets out there that support our entrepreneurs. And wouldn't it be great if, did I just turn it off? See, I'm sorry here. Oh, there we go. I mean, I was in Washington, D.C. This is the map of the Washington, D.C. subway system. And the really cool thing about the Washington, D.C. subway system, unlike some across the country, which I won't mention, is that when you get into the system, you know exactly where you're going, right? You know what the next stop is going to be. You know how to get on the ramp. You know where you're going. You know how to trade over to the other lines if you need to. It's a pretty nice wayfinding system. Yet we have all these entrepreneurial resources around, and the big question is, how do I find the one that's right for me at the time that I need it? So when it came to identifying what's here for entrepreneurs in Kansas City, we said this is what we need. We need the subway map of resources for entrepreneurs in Kansas City. And indeed, we built it. I have it right here. This is our subway map of the resources in the Kansas City region. And it doesn't matter what kind of entrepreneur you are, whether you are a Main Street entrepreneur or a micro entrepreneur or a second stage entrepreneur, or one of those high growth tech entrepreneurs, there's a line on this map for you that you can follow through the resources that you need. And there's also something called the money line, so that you can figure out where the money is. Well, let's think about this. So back in 2011, we said, okay, we want to figure out what we have to do to make America's most entrepreneurial city. And if you read the reports that were out there that we could just pull off the shelves, there were really 6 things that this community said we need. We need better access to capital for our entrepreneurs. We need more corporate engagement for our entrepreneurs. We need to measure the talent. Do we have the talent we need to run the businesses that we're trying to build here? Do we have the pipeline of opportunity coming out of our universities and other areas that we can use to grow new businesses? And do we have the awareness of Kansas City as a place to be for entrepreneurship, as well as the resources we need to help people with the technical assistance to get their businesses built? So those were the 6 things that we looked at back in 2011, and today we're seeing good movement in a couple of those, especially the awareness of Kansas City as being an entrepreneurial marker. So we have lots of people coming in here, talent is coming here to drive forward their businesses because people think we've got an entrepreneurial vibe, so we're excited about that. The other thing that's changed a bit is capital. And so remember I said identify, connect, empower, and measure. So we decided that, hey, our money line maybe needs a little bit of help. So when you drew out the line, you could see that there were gaps in moving an entrepreneur from one type of funding to another. So as a matter of fact, we got together as a community and said, let's create a report that helps us identify what's going on in the capital in Kansas City. And we looked at loans, we looked at grants, we looked at equity. And we said, okay, what's out there from the federal government that we're not using? What's out there from the local area that we're not using? Is the state doing anything? What are we doing locally to be creative about making new forms of capital for our entrepreneurs? And the biggest thing that we found out when we did this study was that we simply weren't very well connected here in Kansas City. Our entrepreneurs didn't know the investors didn't know the entrepreneurs, and a very important point was the investors didn't know other investors, so deals were not flowing around. So as much as we think it's about the money, what we found out was that it's just as much about connecting people to each other so that they can make those transactions happen. So we defined the problem, suggested an action plan. And back in 2012, this was sort of our continuum for capital. So that place on your left, that valley of death, is where these little companies are trying to find their next $10,000 to make something happen, right? And after they find that $10,000, then they need the $50,000, and then they need the $100,000, and then they need the $500,000, and then they get up to the point where, hey, they found the market, we've got some revenue, they can move into the institutional investors. And we had a pretty sparse continuum here. So what was happening was people would get a tranche of money, and then they'd try to get the next tranche, and they would get stuck. And you know what? We were sitting here in the middle of America. We weren't Boston or down in the Silicon Valley area. We weren't, we never will be. So what do we have to do creatively to win where we stand and figure out what resources we have here to make something happen? And so we put all this information out in the community, and we empowered them to make a difference. And about actually 4 years later, this is what our continuum is looking like today. So we have new funds. We have some really new creative funds, and that's the crowd up here. We needed good proof of concept funding, so Jeff Shackelford, who's sitting here right to my left, will talk about Digital Sandbox KC and how that came to be. We were able to take advantage of a federal program to make that one happen. Next to him is Maggie Kennefe, who's going to talk about the Fountain Innovation Fund, which is a very creative way of funding funding companies here in this community, and it's a fund she's working on, also started through a federal incentive program here. And then next to her is Darcy Howe. Darcy, in addition to really taking on the charge of connecting investors and entrepreneurs to each other and building something out called KC Invest Ed, and she'll maybe say a few words about the dinners that she's been hosting for several years, but she's also found another creative way to get funders here in Kansas City together so that they can only invest in Kansas City. And she'll explain why that happened here in a few minutes. So they're up here and they'll talk more about that. So we measure results. We track investment. We track who's investing. We track whether it's loans, grants, or equity. We've made major progress in not just the equity environment, but also in the micro-lending environment here in our community, in this region. We also track interesting things like what's our pipeline of innovation? What is coming out of the universities? Not necessarily patents, but what opportunities are really getting commercialized and getting developed. We can also heat map where our entrepreneurs are in the metro area here in the Kansas City region as well. And we can also now track connections between people as we continue to build this environment for entrepreneurs. And so, what does this all really do? What's interesting is that, and we also track this. So in 2016, we know that our first-time employers in Kansas City created 16,325 jobs. 16,325 jobs. So that kind of says that in 4 years I can beat Amazon, right? So it is really our first-time employers and our early entrepreneurs that are important. And then over a 5-year time frame, in those cohorts that are creating these jobs, 2012, 2013, 2014, 15, and 16, 84,000 jobs were created here in Kansas City by our first-time employers, and that includes the ones that went out of business. That is very close to 8% of our workforce in 5 years. And so this is why entrepreneurship is really important to the work that we do here in the region and why we're so excited about building a better environment so we can get those young companies off the ground. And now I'm going to actually move over here and join the crowd, and they're going to tell you more about some of the work that's being done in the early stage funding in the community here.
So as Marie mentioned, we launched the program roughly a little more than 5 years ago because Maria and others noticed a gap in the ecosystem. If you were an early stage, and I intentionally say early, entrepreneur with a concept, but didn't have a product, didn't have customers, didn't have the right friends, family, and tools to give you money, didn't know where to go, they were stuck. And we said, if they're stuck, how do we make them unstuck, right? And if you want to be America's most entrepreneurial city, you got to create more entrepreneurs. And so we launched a program to offer them project development grants only up to $20,000 through an I-6, U.S. Commerce Department I-6 grant. We said, let's test the hypothesis that if you could help very early stage entrepreneurs, you could drive positive economic development in the geographical region, the metro area. So I'll fast forward because Maria knows that I only have a couple of minutes and we're kicking here in a minute. Them moving, they're welcome to come back and apply as many times as possible. So of those 111, 70 have gone on to raise $68 million in equity in a short period if you're thinking they don't have a product to when they're raising equity. And we've created around 650 jobs from entrepreneurs who had nowhere to go 5 years ago. So we fill the funnel. We're trying to shove as much as we can into the funnel. And we know that the market conditions and the investment community and so on will filter them out. But if you can't keep the funnel full, I will simply tell you it doesn't matter how much capital you have available in your city. If you don't have good entrepreneurs, good ideas, good teams, scalable ideas, they're not going to get funded. And so our mission from the Sandbox perspective is to feed the funnel, push them down the line. They're ready then to move to Maggie's fund, I shouldn't say Maggie's fund, the fund that Maggie manages. They eventually get down to Darcy and others, and then to the full VC world and so on. So with that, I'll make the transition.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So my name is Maggie Kennefake, and I am the Managing Director of the Fountain Innovation Fund, which is a very unique fund here in the Kansas City community. It's housed and managed at the Enterprise Center of Johnson County, which is a 24-year-old venture development organization here in this community was charged and created by Johnson County to create jobs, which its critical mission, but it also creates wealth and grows companies across the metro area. So while we're situated in Johnson County, it has always been our purview to support companies on both sides of the state line, with the thinking that what happens to the benefit of the Kansas City metro region accrues to the benefit of Johnson County. So we do that through a number of ways. We do that through a variety of programs, education and mentoring programs. We license the Growth Mentoring Services program from MIT. We also house the most effective angel group in the Midwest called Mid-America Angel Capital Association, and Women's Capital Connection. So in 2006, we launched Mid-America Angels, and in 2007, we coalesced female investors who wanted to focus on supporting female entrepreneurs or women-led companies. We have put almost $30 million to work in 100 transactions and 50 companies. Recognizing a gap in the marketplace through the We Create Capital report and with the support of a number of local community partners, we secured a Department of Commerce grant in 2017. I think it actually came through in 2018, to launch a seed fund, a pre-seed and seed fund. The model leverages philanthropic contributions to make investments in very early stage companies. So just after proof of concept is where the Fountain Innovation Fund steps in. And the idea, as Jeff said, talking about putting more companies into the funnel, we want to widen that funnel a bit. We want to create more shots on goal. We want to see more companies get across that valley of death that Maria talked about at a faster pace and get over to where Darcy or Mid-America Angels or other institutional investors can come in and support them, because we know that all net new jobs in any community are really created by small businesses. So we're here to make more of them thrive and flourish.
I'm Darcy Howe. I'm a part of the Casey Rising initiative, which was founded a few years ago in Kansas City, to try and figure out why are we not growing as quickly as a lot of other cities that maybe some of you are from. How can we figure this out? And there are about 300 business people, me being one of them, who came off the sidelines and said, we'll see what we can do to help. I heard Maria a couple of years ago say, boy, we just need to build the connections. And I was a 32-year asset manager, wealth manager, who had retired. And so I thought, okay, well, I could try and help. So a couple of things that I built out of this Casey Rising initiative. One was something that Maria mentioned, which is Casey Invested. It's a super simple idea you can do in any of your towns. I love to entertain. I know investors because those were my clients. And so one of the guys who knows entrepreneurs, we put together a group that every month for the first couple of years, we only met in my home. Now we're meeting in homes and businesses all over the city, where we get 4 or 5 entrepreneurs, 4 or 5 investors sitting around the dinner table just to know one another and understand each other's reality, building those connections. The other thing that I built was this fund. It's a venture capital fund. Only 0.5% of all startups get venture funding. Like, why would I do something like that is such a small? Well, I need a big, huge funnel like these two. And my goal was to educate and grow more early stage investors in Kansas City. And as a founding member of Women's Capital Connection and a lifetime asset manager, I thought, oh, I'll get well-to-do people together with the startups. And what was happening in Kansas City and maybe in some of your towns is the startups, once they needed 5 or 10 or 15, $20 million, we weren't organized to find that here. And so they would leave town. And so the third thing that I developed out from the KC Rising Initiative is something that we call #BackToKC. We combed LinkedIn to find former Kansas Cityans who do cool things in technology and put together a couple of days for them to come back and see all these amazing things that are being built here. So we're growing our talent pipeline back.
So one of the things that I mentioned is that there's some very creative ways to drive capital in Kansas City. And Darcy, you might talk from the point of view of, we had a number of people that we knew had the capacity to invest here, but getting them interested in investing was an education process. And the KC Rise Fund 1 certainly helped to make that happen. We did have a series of educational lunches and different things to explain to people what is this thing called investing. But talk a little bit about how that first fund got set up and why, from the Kansas City perspective.
Yes, so Kansas City, we just needed to connect the dots, as Maria said. And so I ran around town and said, if we built a fund, would you come? And that fund would be to invest only in this region. We're a co-investment fund, so we need a venture capital firm from somewhere around the country to take a look at what we have in Kansas City and say, yes, that's the best tech idea, or that's the best healthcare idea, or whatever, of all the things that I've seen. And so we would identify that deal flow for them. We have 110 venture firms around the country who we now are the eyes and ears for this region to show them ideas. And we partnered with 25. We raised $19 million. Our portfolio right now is 16 companies strong. I'm winking at one of my investors over here. Thank you very much for having believed when we had nothing. And in the rounds in which we were invested, not their previous angel rounds, but just in the rounds in which the KC Rice Fund is invested, they've raised $104 million, and 54% of that came from out of town. So we're connecting the dots with investors by getting them off the sidelines. We have 90 investors in our fund, and we're also then bringing capital from outside of Kansas City. And one thing I want to say, too, about the local investors, you've got to bring systemic change. Kansas City is a pretty slow-to-move conservative spot, right? So I'm targeting the next gen because they get technology, they've got a longer time horizon, and getting the next gen of well-to-do families to enjoy this and learn how to invest in all of these will trickle to all of us, right? They'll have a lot of fun. We will grow Kansas City, and our risk tolerance in this town will hopefully.
Yeah, and I think 3 of the 16 came through the sandbox. So it's proof that it works, that if you get them started, get on what I call the evolutionary path, we can get you to the right people. But if we're not getting them in, finding them in, I found it interesting when he mentioned successful environment for women entrepreneurs. A third of the companies that we have funded were founded or co-founded by women in the tech space, which I think the national average is about 4%. And 22% come from those populations that are typically underserved. So if you're going to build America's most entrepreneurial city, you got to find every entrepreneur in the region and shove them forward.
So thank you for that from the panel. And I think one of the things that you probably have heard is that it's a continuum, and you have to build out all the places in the continuum, and our community has come together to do that. And anybody else who's interested in helping us build out that continuum that's sitting in the audience, we want to hear from you. So with that, I'll wrap it up, and thank you to everybody.
Ranked Kansas City 10th in the world for exciting places to go this year, and that panel makes it clear why. They talk about the revitalization and everything that's going on here. Number 11 was French Polynesia, just so you know. It's where you stand. Okay, a few housekeeping notes. The first thing for tomorrow morning, we look forward to everybody coming back here. There'll be breakfast out in the hallway. Tables set up in here between 7:30 and 8:30. Immediately following breakfast, Linda McMahon, administrator for the Small Business Administration, will be presenting Tuesday's keynote address in here. And for tonight, the welcome reception at Children's Mercy Park, the Sporting KC Stadium. We ask that for security reasons, everybody wear your badge. It will make getting you in there much easier. During the welcome reception, tour guides will be available on the lower level of the stadium between 6:15 and 7:30. So if you want to get a tour of the stadium, take advantage. For those of you who plan on driving, there's plenty of parking, so go ahead and drive and park on site. For those of you not driving, buses will be departing from here on the lower level just as soon as we finish up, so go ahead and take the escalator down and hop on one of the buses. The shuttles will start returning back to the Sheraton Overland Park beginning at 7 p.m., and they'll run until everybody gets back. We won't leave anybody out there. And that's it. Thank you guys for a great first day, and look forward to tomorrow.